waters of the Persian Gulf are rapidly heating up to an absolute boiling point. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz has been the ultimate geopolitical choke point, and one specific nation has constantly used it as a loaded weapon against the global economy. Tehran's ultimate trump card has always been the threat of a total naval blockade. If they shut down this narrow waterway, 20% of the world's oil stops moving. The resulting global financial crash would be immediate and absolutely devastating. To achieve this, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps developed a very specific strategy. They built a massive fleet of heavily armed, incredibly fast attack boats. This swarm tactic was specifically designed to overwhelm massive American destroyers. How do you sink a multi-billion-dollar warship? You send 50 cheap, expendable speedboats armed with rockets and torpedoes right at it. For years, this asymmetric warfare threat kept Western naval commanders awake at night, but the United States military just changed the rules of the game entirely. They deployed a weapons system that completely turns the hunters into the hunted, and it neutralized the threat of an Iranian blockade almost overnight. Enter the AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. You usually see this legendary gunship hovering over harsh desert battlefields or mountains, but right now, it is completely dominating the open waters of the Middle East. What happens when you put the world's most lethal tank killer over the ocean? The results are absolutely devastating for anyone attempting to close the strait, because the Apache was perfectly designed to destroy fast, unpredictable, moving targets. To understand this massive shift in power, we have to look at the naval chessboard. A US Navy destroyer is incredibly powerful, but it has a specific blind spot. Its massive radar systems are designed to track high-altitude jets and incoming missiles. Tracking dozens of tiny fiberglass boats bouncing on the waves is a completely different nightmare. By the time the destroyer locks onto the swarm, the boats are already dangerously close. The IRGC knew this weakness and built their entire naval doctrine around it, but the American military commanders recognized this critical vulnerability. They needed a platform that could loiter in the air and see the swarm coming. They needed something heavily armored, incredibly fast, and armed to the teeth. They started landing U.S. Army Apaches on the decks of Navy staging bases. Ships like the USS Lewis B became floating fortresses for these deadly helicopters. And the moment those Apaches took to the sky, the balance of power shifted instantly. Let's break down exactly why the Apache is the ultimate nightmare for Iranian speedboats. It all comes down to a piece of technology called the Longbow radar. This system sits right above the helicopter's main rotor blades. The Longbow can track up to 128 distinct targets simultaneously. It instantly calculates their speed, their direction, and their threat level. In a matter of seconds, it prioritizes which boat needs to be destroyed first. Imagine an Iranian fast attack craft speeding across the Gulf at 50 knots. The crew thinks they are completely invisible under the cover of darkness, but the Apache has already locked onto them from miles away. The helicopter doesn't even need to reveal its position to strike. It can hover completely hidden behind a massive oil tanker or a coastal island. Only the radar dome peeks out, silently painting the targets in the dark. Once the targets are locked, the Apache unleashes its primary weapon, the AGM-114 Hellfire missile. Originally designed to punch through Soviet tank armor, it absolutely vaporizes small boats. A single Apache can carry up to 16 of these devastating missiles. That means one helicopter can wipe out an entire IRGC patrol unit before they even react. And the Apache doesn't operate alone. They hunt in heavily coordinated wolf packs. But what happens if the swarm gets too close for missiles? That is when the Apache unleashes its most terrifying close-range asset, the 30mm M230 chain gun mounted directly under the nose. This weapon is slaved directly to the pilot's helmet. Wherever the pilot looks, the gun immediately turns and points. It fires over 600 high-explosive rounds every single minute. Against a fiberglass speedboat packed with fuel and ammunition, it is a meat grinder. The kinetic energy alone is enough to tear the small vessels completely in half. The IRGC commanders watched these capabilities during live fire exercises, and they panicked. Their entire multi-billion-dollar strategy of naval swarming was suddenly obsolete. You cannot swarm a target that is hunting you from 2,000 feet in the air, and you certainly cannot outrun a laser-guided missile traveling at Mach 1.3. This deployment isn't just a simple tactical adjustment by the Pentagon. It is a massive, highly calculated geopolitical message broadcast directly to Tehran. The message is loud, clear, and incredibly dangerous. If you try to close the Strait of Hormuz, your navy will cease to exist. This is exactly how you project dominance in the modern theater of war. You don't just match your enemy's strategy, you completely override it. Recent encounters in the Gulf have already proven this new reality. When Iranian boats attempt to harass commercial shipping lanes, the response is immediate. The distinct, heavy thumping of Apache rotor blades fills the air within minutes. The moment the IRGC crews hear that sound, they immediately turn back toward the coast. They know that staying in open water means absolute guaranteed destruction. The psychological warfare aspect of the Apache is almost as powerful as its weapons, but the integration of Army helicopters onto Navy ships wasn't an easy task. Pilots had to learn how to land on aggressively pitching decks in the middle of the ocean. Saltwater corrosion threatened to eat through the highly sensitive electronic avionics. The mechanics and engineers worked around the clock to solve these massive logistical nightmares. They applied specialized coatings and completely rewrote standard operational protocols. The result is a seamless, lethal joint force operation that shocked global military analysts. Other nations are now watching this strategy with extreme interest. The Chinese Navy relies heavily on maritime militia swarms in the South China Sea. They are analyzing every single detail of this Apache deployment in the Middle East, because if it works perfectly in the Strait of Hormuz, it can work anywhere. The era of the fast attack boat ruling the narrow waterways might finally be over. Air superiority is officially claiming dominance over the asymmetrical naval battlespace. What does this mean for the future of the global oil market? It means the artificial panic created by blockade threats is losing its grip. The economic blackmail that Tehran relies on is suddenly looking incredibly weak. Of course, the region remains an incredibly dangerous powder keg. Iran still possesses a massive arsenal of anti-ship ballistic missiles and sea mines. The Apache is a powerful deterrent, but it is not a magical shield. However, the specific threat of a swarm-induced blockade is no longer viable. The United States has essentially placed a heavily armed guard dog at the world's most vital gate, and that guard dog has 16 Hellfire missiles ready to launch at a moment's notice. The geopolitical chessboard has been permanently altered by this single deployment. Military dominance isn't always about building a bigger ship or a louder bomb. Sometimes it's about placing the exact right weapon in the exact right environment. The AH-64 Apache has found its new ultimate hunting ground. The waters of Hormuz will never be the same again, and the enemies of global trade are being forced to rethink everything they know.